Hey friends, your friend Andy here. Thanks for tuning into my podcast where I like to chat with people who I would call self-starters. In this episode, I have Kieran Drew. He used to be a dentist, but then decided to give all that up, that career up, and try this whole online creator thing. Now, he left his job to write online between Twitter, his newsletter, getting featured on Forbes, and a bunch more. He's now an incredibly prolific writer. Not only did he quit his job to do all this, but just a month ago, he made $141,000 in just a few days from this new career path he has chosen. He's what I like to call an overnight success, years in the making. And if that's not enough, he also has an incredibly successful OnlyFans account. So thank you for being on the podcast here, Kieran.
And I think that's my favorite intro so far, Andy. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet. So I did read a tweet recently of yours that you said you have been on 7 podcasts recently. So I'm curious. One, that's pretty funny. But 2, what's it like being someone who's behind the keyboard all the time now, suddenly being behind the camera a lot, or in front of the camera?
You know what, man? It's been a lot of fun, actually. I think writing can get a bit lonely in a way, and I'm quite happy sitting in my flat for weeks on end without talking to people. But there just came a point where it was just me and my ideas over and over and over. And so the podcast side has been really fun. It also kind of highlighted to me that talking is another skill, right? And so hopefully I'm getting less waffly as I go along, and the stories are getting a little bit more entertaining. And the other really cool bit is when you start talking about stuff you've been writing about, and you're like, oh wow, this stuff is actually stuck in my head. So it's been cool, man. Like I think after you, I'm stopping for a little while though, because I want to go back to my writing cave.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be a theme of a few topics I want to cover on this episode. And that is like building up skills that maybe you didn't realize were as important as they are, which I think you would probably agree that writing is one of them. But yeah, certainly this whole like being in front of the camera thing, it can actually be useful. Who would have thought?
I think really important for the personality side, right? It's really hard to get your bond built just with writing alone, is what I've found. I think you have to be a very talented writer. So yeah, just trying to start spreading the leverage around a little bit. It's quite exciting.
Awesome. So before we jump into this, let's take a quick break and hear from this episode's sponsor. If you are like me, then you are either a small business owner or you would like to start your own small business one day. And when you do that, you're going to need a banking solution that's truly built just for your business. That means no fees, no minimum balances, and no bookkeeping problems when tax season rolls around. Because why would you want to make tax season even less fun? That's where Relay comes in. Relay is an online banking and money management platform that's a perfect fit for small businesses and one I recommend. Again, Relay has no account fees, no overdraft fees, and no minimum balances, which means you get to keep more in your pocket. One of my favorite features is that you can get up to 20 individual accounts, including 2 savings accounts, to organize and allocate income for things like day-to-day expenses, investments, or taxes. You can now earn up to 3% APY on savings with Relay savings accounts. You can create virtual and physical debit cards for you and your employees in seconds. And best of all, Relay makes your bookkeeping speedy and meticulous by giving you ultra detailed transaction data and directly syncing it back to QuickBooks Online and Xero. And so many other amazing features I don't have time to tell you about here. Really, they do a lot. It only takes 10 minutes to apply for a free Relay account, and you can do it online at relayfi.com/yourfriendandy. Again, that is relayfi.com/yourfriendandy. Okay, let's jump into this episode. Okay, and we're back with Kieran here. So I want to start off because, again, I like to focus on people, talking to people on this podcast who I would call self-starters. I am someone who's done my own business, done my own thing, taken my own path. That's something I like to dig into with people. I'm fascinated with people who choose that path. So I'm kind of curious what was like the moment, or if there wasn't a moment, what was the thinking behind what most people would call a great career, you know, being a dentist? Why on earth would you leave that to do this whole other thing?
Yeah, man. Dentistry is a funny one. I mean, I became a dentist like a lot of people because you get told around 16 that, dentist, doctor, or lawyer, and you're successful. And I just remember being at uni and thinking, I didn't really enjoy the work, but everyone was like, oh, we're going to have Porsches. It's going to be good fun. It'll be great. And long story short, I ended up, I wanted to be very good at what I did. And I was working really hard as a dentist, 6 days a week, a lot of self-education. And I just remember being in my car, driving to work, feeling anxious, feeling like I was kind of climbing the wrong mountain, listening to podcasts of people who had built a creative career or, were genuinely passionate about the work they were doing. And I kept thinking to myself, I don't feel that. And it didn't really sink home, mate, until COVID hit and lockdown came. And of course, I couldn't see patients for maybe 3-4 months. And I remember that one of the first days that I sat there and was like, wow, I didn't realize how hard I was going to go in the wrong direction. And the penny sort of dropped when I was like, well, I was reading about mental models and I heard about opportunity cost. And the penny dropped when I was like, all this effort you're putting into working a career you don't love is stopping you from building one that you do. And my friend sent me a podcast from Naval Ravikant, How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky. And he was like, hey, this guy has some ideas you might agree with. And it was the most painful but purposeful 3 hours of my life because A, I realized my entire ethics around money and work and leverage were completely wrong. And B, I realized that I had to escape. And so that was 2020 April. And then it was just from there, it's just been wondering or trying to slowly work out how you get out of dentistry, which wasn't the easiest transition.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, I feel like there's lots of stories of people who they hear other people talking about this type of lifestyle or choosing this path. Podcasts, like you said, and videos. I know one big kind of inspiration for me was watching a bunch of YouTubers talk about, successful financial YouTubers talk about how much they were making each month and talking about what the lifestyle was they're living. I'm like, oh, I would like that. And it sounds like you're similar to me in that 2020 was kind of the great birther for a lot of people of a new take on life, a new career. Suddenly being confronted with a bit more time and maybe to explore and answer and ask those questions. So like you got this idea in your head and you decided you were, going to at least explore this stuff. What were those first like baby steps or those kind of exploratory steps that you took when you were still a dentist? You hadn't leapt out yet, but you wanted to like figure things out.
Yeah, well, in Naval's podcast, one of the first things he says is pursuing your intellectual curiosity is better than chasing whatever's hot right now or whatever you think are making the most money, which is the complete opposite to how I've been brought up, right? It was always, you go for the job that pays well. And so I just there, pen and paper thinking, what would be the coolest job I could do if money was no object? And I actually didn't land on writing. I thought of stand-up comedy. I was like, hey, it'd be great to make people laugh. Like, what a brilliant way to add value to people's lives. So I just started, again, I've never been a creative person at all. I was always the maths science guy, the one that can recite numbers. And I just thought, look, you think you suck at creating, but how could you ever know because you never really tried? And so I would just spend 2-3 hours in the morning writing jokes and stories. And then in the afternoon, I would practice them. And I have a lot of cringe videos of me with a hairbrush, recording the jokes. And for better or worse, the only person that had to hear them was my girlfriend. And what happened was, man, after maybe 6 weeks or so of just really enjoying the creative process without pressure, I started to realize that there were a few things that probably wouldn't line up with stand-up with how I wanted to live, right? A, I don't want to be going around clubs every night. Like I'm in bed by 9 p.m. usually. I like the old lifestyle. And B, I was fascinated by the internet. And so I went back to the drawing board and I looked at my energy from before and I was like, you know what, man? Like the 2-3 hours in the morning when I'm writing are like gold dust. Right, time would fly. I felt so energized by the end of it. And usually I'm used to like drained every day with work. And this was my first taste of flow. And, you can probably agree. I think there's no better feeling than being in the flow of a skill that you genuinely love. And this is when I sucked at it, right? And I suck a little bit less now. But I went back to the drawing board and thought, well, look, how are people building a writing career? Because prior to then, I thought, writers either own books or made no money. And then I started to, look at Farnham Street, James Clear, all these sort of things. And it slowly introduced me to how writers are a brilliant way to get your foot in the door of the creator economy.
Very cool. I love that there's this alternate Earth version of Kieran out there who actually became a stand-up comedian or something. So who were your inspiration? Like, what comedians did you look to at that time and you loved listening to?
Obviously I'm British. Jimmy Carr is my favorite. So Frankie Boyle. I like the very dry, rude humor, which doesn't come through on my Twitter so much, thankfully. But
I don't know if there is a more brutal roaster than Jimmy Carr out there. I used to watch the Comedy Central roasts a lot, and they once or twice had him in there, and he's amazing. He's incredibly witty and creative with the way he comes up with that stuff.
Well, I'm actually going to see him next week. We have seats 3 rows from the front, so I'm hoping we get his attention, because dentist and writer, I think that is pure material to get ripped to shreds. So
all you gotta do is just heckle him in public and then wait for it, for better or for worse. So in this whole starting this whole new chapter or whatever, you're effectively, I mean, whether you look at it this way or not, you've started your own business. And maybe you don't put as formal of a title on it like that as I am, but what's been one or two of the more surprising things that you found out that you weren't expecting as you kind of did this, started your new business?
I think the most surprising part at the time was how different life feels when you're pursuing something you genuinely believe in. And because dentistry I was doing pretty well, man, like earning well, good job, but I was never really like that excited for life. And like now, man, it's like I haven't been bored in about 3 years, because there's always something to do and it's all really fun. And this feeling of having work that feels like play is brilliant. And I know you said it's like a business, but I mean, I didn't get paid for 18 months when I started, and it still felt amazing. Like, people were like, oh wow, how did you persist through? And I was like, it was cool. It was just creating. The other thing that was quite surprising or very humbling was starting again from the bottom, because as a dentist, the path is sort of laid out for you from 16, right? You pass your A-levels, you pass this, you get a job. There's no kind of competition there. And you are a doctor, right? So you're high authority. And starting again from the bottom as a writer, you tell your friends, you tell your family, they all think you've lost your mind. There was a lot of imposter syndrome. Like it was crazy, because I used to charge $5,000 for teeth, and I was terrified to charge $50 for writing. I just didn't have that self-belief. So really humbling. But these days I realized that like starting from the bottom is only a problem if you're measuring by other people's standards, right? And I'm very big in this now, where I'm happy to pivot as much as possible, because it's just you versus you. And if you're at the bottom, it's great, because you're just going from level 1 to 2 to 3. So it's been a wild experience, man. Lots of lessons for it.
That is such a familiar to me thing, but also a theme when I talk to people who are entrepreneurial. People who are not quite able to make the leap to the kind of entrepreneurial lifestyle have trouble with the you versus you, with the challenge of starting from scratch. They need, and it's not wrong or right or bad or good, but some people just need to go to work and have a boss who lays out the things that you're going to do, and these are your goals, and they can still have fun and do whatever in that environment. But entrepreneurs seem to be okay without that, and they're able to, through discipline or through just pure motivation or just excitement or fun, or some of the words you used, able to kind of push through that barrier and build their own kind of rules. Is that true for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, no entrepreneurial experience before dentistry, but I don't know. I think it's just more about reading, man. And I kept reading. I think it's Taleb, where he was saying the comfort of a paycheck is like heroin, right? And stuff like that just started to change my worldview a little bit, when I was like, actually, I guess it depends on your boss as well, but my priorities shifted from how much money I could make to how much freedom I could make. And it just seemed to be completely out of whack when I was working 50 hours a week to make six figures. And I was like, but I think I'd probably be happier if I could do the same with 10 hours a week. Obviously, that'd be pretty sweet regardless, but even though I was making much less. And so I feel like when I realized that the success is subjective, right? Like it's an internal game, then you could change the rules a bit. And that's where work actually got really hard, man, because sun's shining and I'm like, oh, brilliant. I hope this waits till Sunday so I can get into a really busy park and enjoy it. And these little things really started to weigh on me where I was like, look, and by the time I quit my job, I was like, you have to take back control here or else it just feels like a really big waste of life. So I know some people aren't wired like that. I've learned that a little bit now. At first, I was telling everyone be an entrepreneur. And then by that, now I'm like to maybe 18 months into monetization. I'm like, Jesus, this has been really hard work. So I say it less. I just make sure that you accept like what you're signing on for.
It's very tempting. I know I am guilty of it online in my videos and stuff, that I want to like spread the gospel of the entrepreneur lifestyle. I want everybody else to, break free, but it's it's not for everybody. And I get that. But you were kind of talking about like, the fun of it and stuff. And you talked about, Taleb and how he says, it's like paycheck is like heroin. Well, I have one of my most popular tweets of all time is I call 9-to-5 jobs comfort money. And I don't, it's tweet, it's whatever. I don't really believe that for everybody, but still, there's people who are kind of stuck in those lifestyles, and some people are thriving and happy with, but some people are stuck and they want out. So what is it, now that you're on the other side of it, why are so many people like, why is it so hard to take that first leap to get out of that world if they want to?
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to anyone who feels stuck because that feeling of hopelessness, it really broke me down. Like I said, just constantly thinking, it's really weird. It's like constantly wanting to create, but knowing no clear path to do it. And I feel like most people don't take that first step because it's the fear of failure, right? You're like, oh, this probably won't work. I'm being stupid. Who's going to listen to me? Who would ever buy my stuff? And this is just like the monkey mind being quite self-fulfilling. If you think like that, that's how it's going to go. And so I always say that I think at the start, like as cringe as it is, it's that fake it till you make it thing. You kind of have to persuade yourself that this is going to work and then get to work to make it happen. And so what I usually say is, I don't know, it's like, first off, you have to make it such a small target so you're not getting overwhelmed, right? I think if you're thinking about a 6-figure business before you've posted a tweet online, got a long way to go. And similarly on that vein, I'm very big into gamification because one thing I love about playing games, man, when I used to a lot, you never have this fear of death when you play a game, right? Like if you die, you respawn, you go again, you get better, you put in the reps. For some reason, when it comes to our success or, how we look online, that failure feels fatal. But it's really not. Like I failed for 18 months when I started writing online. I failed on like 4 platforms. I had to quit a newsletter. I failed at copywriting, all of these things. And when it's a game, when you're just like, look, I'm at level 1 and I'm here to kill wolves, but one day I'll be level 60 killing dragons. It kind of removes a bit of the mental pressure, right? Like I think this game is 80% mindset. So whatever little tricks and hacks you need to get going, well worth thinking about.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I like that. So on that topic, I know from reading some tweets and things that you really played a lot of World of Warcraft. Any other favorite games?
Man, it was mainly just WoW. Yeah, like yeah, big into the whole fantasy thing. Is my like secret nerdy side. So
I love it. You still play anything?
No. Like business feels like the game now. As cringe as it sounds, like I'm having so much fun that the challenge now is making sure that I do have other hobbies. But when I play a game, it just feels a little bit pointless, unfortunately. So yeah, better or worse.
So I mean, I really like the idea of gamification. I like the idea of, in a game, you can, like you said, you die, you respawn, you can try again, you can try the challenge over and over again. You can beat your head against the wall until you actually get it, and there's virtually no consequences aside from your time spent. Online, I would argue it's much the same, but there are other factors, and for a lot of people, it doesn't feel that way. So how would you encourage someone to like, or how did you get into that mindset where you're really believing that about yourself with all these things you're trying online?
I think I still constantly remind myself about what level I'm at. And so, I'll run through how I think about it. The start is you're an explorer. And when you're exploring, the whole point isn't to succeed, right? It's to find the path that will eventually help you succeed. So when you're exploring, it's cool to try different platforms, try different ideas, to change and pivot. And none of that's a failure, right? Because it's all just kind of making noise and listening for signal, like Jack Butcher would put it. And once you start getting some results, you're more of a reporter. So this is where another one where people go wrong. They feel like online you have to pretend to be someone you're not. And I did this as well, right? I spent a year being like, how to do this, how to do that. When actually people are kind of interested in the person behind the brand. And so as a reporter, all your job is to share what you're learning and share what you're doing. And this is like building in public, right? Because you begin to build a body of work that then is going to help you move on to the next level. And the experimenter, right, is what I say is level 3. And here it's where there are so many ways to build a bloody business online, right? It gets very overwhelming. And most of my friends are like stuck here because you're constantly overthinking between do I do this and do I do that and do I do that? But my first 12 months of monetization, I mean, I launched a product, group coaching, consulting, ghostwriting. Like I tried everything with this idea of being like, I'm here to experiment, not to win. Which made pivoting painless, mostly. Although like watching the revenue go up and down was a little bit painful. And then like once you're getting into that entrepreneurial phase, which kind of where we're at now, is that idea of doing less but better, right? Going in and you've kind of found the thing that makes you really interested. And then I feel like the metric of failure changes there because I feel like I'm failing now if I'm spread too thin. Which I think is quite an important distinction because I think a lot of my friends are hitting like the ceiling of like 5-10K a month. And then it's like, oh, well, what are you up to? And they're like, this long list of things. And it's like, dude, as an entrepreneur, you want to start nailing 1 or 2 things repeatedly, which is where I got into product building. So I guess, yeah, remembering it is part of a game, but also just giving yourself a break. Like people aren't thinking about you anywhere near as much as you're thinking about yourself. Particularly if you're just starting writing online, no one's even reading. So like giving yourself a break. And me personally, man, like I'm a huge fan of celebrating the effort and not the result. If I know that I've put in a shit ton of work for something to happen, that's what I'm going to base my self-worth on. It's hard to do, but that's a lot of like kind of reflecting and just making sure that you're playing the right game in your head.
Yeah, that's really good. So I'm curious. I like a lot of these kind of mindset things we're talking about, but I would also like to ask a couple of questions about the practical side. So before you left dentistry to do this whole thing, what were some practical things that you did to prepare for this? Did you save a bunch of money? Did you do some other thing? Like what did you do to help, give yourself the greatest chance of success possible?
Sure. I mean, in essence, we're talking about what leverage did we apply, right? And there was 2 things really, or 3. So the firstly was money. Okay. Originally I was very big into the financial independence, retirement early movement, the FIRE movement, because I crave freedom. And so my idea was get as rich as you can, retire by 40. I now think that's a bit of a toxic trap as a side note, because, this aim of like, I'll be happy when is not a good thing to be shooting for when you could actually be just making money doing something you love, as a side note. So I did have a burn rate. I was saving up money. The other thing I did, which I advise everyone to do, is like, if you're not sure what you want to do, just start writing, because an audience builds optionality, right? You're attracting people you can help with ideas you believe in, but you're also beginning to build a bit of a reputation and identity, connecting with really cool people, so that if and when you do decide to pivot from your 9 to 5, you're not there diving in deep end of the pool, right? You've got your little armbands on and you're getting ready to go. So those are the 2 things I did do, mate. The only thing that didn't quite go to plan was I was going to do dentistry for probably still till now. Yeah, like an extra 2-3 years, and slowly phase it out, because I'm naturally quite risk adverse with decision making. And due to some circumstances, I had a choice between, do I work another 12, 18 months at a new job, or do I just say fuck it and go all in? And by then I was just obsessed with writing, and I was like, if I don't give this my full thing, I'm going to be very unhappy. So I ended up quitting a lot earlier, but preparing for that launch was audience, and I maybe had 5,000 followers, and then enough money to survive without cutting back lifestyle for about 7 months. And that was really important to me because I classically have quite a scarcity mindset with money. I'm from the north of England. Anyone who knows Yorkshire knows that we're very tight-fisted. And I'd actually been working quite hard to get rid of that, right? Because I think it's a horrible trait to have this scarcity mindset with money. And I thought, if I quit my job and say that we have to start eating out of like soup tins and stuff, it's going to affect my business mindset too. And so I just said, look, let's just live normal, eat well, all that things. And that really put a fire under my ass to build the business when it got to like March. So
love it. Okay. That's okay. Lots of things to break down there that I think are really, really good. One, I would agree with you about FIRE in general. I love the FIRE movement from the idea, and I try to apply my own life to this, of I want to get enough money that I have that, fuck you money. I have that I can just work optional money, while also not ever thinking that's the end, or that I actually want to get to a place where I just stop doing things that are interesting or fun. Sounds like you kind of view that the same way, maybe. But I think it's a great, kind of path to get you to a place where you can do, certain things. But I think the second thing you said that was really interesting to me, that I totally agree with, is so many times when people actually do, decide they're going to break free from the job or whatever, and they start taking actions towards that, preparation, they can just sit in the world of preparation for ages and never actually leave it. And it sounds like at one point you're just like, okay, I'm just all in. That's kind of what I did when I jumped ship from my previous startup job. So how did you recognize that moment? Like, walk me through go back to that time when you were kind of still in the preparation phase. How did you recognize, oh, maybe I'm over preparing. I'm just go for it.
Yeah. It was more of an emotional decision as opposed to rational, which is quite unlike me because I'd spent the whole time being rational. And my boss called me and was like, look, your job isn't going to be ready for a month, but I'll actually pay you a month to relax. And I was so happy, man. I was running up and down my flat thinking, fuck yeah, this is sick. And then when I was thinking about why it was sick, it wasn't so I could relax for a month. It was so I could work as hard as I could in my creative career. And, I was sitting there thinking, and I was like, dude, if you've ever, because I was waiting for this job for 7 months as well. So it was very awkward to say no to him. And I was like, this isn't a signal for you to maybe go all in and for once bet on yourself, because it's the first time I made a big decision like that. I don't know what it is. So I'm classically an over preparer, but I now have learned that overthinking, underperforming, they go very much hand in hand. What I now believe in is skin in the game, right? Because it's so easy to keep reading business books and taking courses and all these things, but nothing will teach you more about what you want to do than doing the thing. And I just couldn't have done that if I was 2 feet, one in a pond and one out. And of course, I don't have kids. That always helps. So I'm sorry to any parents and stuff, but I do feel like people should try to engineer some form of urgency, particularly if you are actually in a well-paid job, because it's like golden handcuffs a little bit. So now these days, what I do, because obviously as an entrepreneur, there's no urgency really. I'm all about tight deadlines. With high impact writing, it was a crazy deadline. It was a lot of work, but just something to kind of kick you into action a little bit, because you could prepare all you want, but no plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? Like when you're on the battlefield, it all goes to shit anyway. So these days it's just get going and then see what happens.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. And I would say that I had the same feeling that you just described. I had already gone on my entrepreneur journey. I'd left my previous job. I started a small business, but then COVID hit, and all of our clients in 2020 either canceled or rescheduled. We were doing creative work. And so we had this big chunk of time that all of a sudden just came out of nowhere. And I had this moment of just hanging out and having complete and total monopoly of my time. And I was like, oh, So, I didn't realize how burned out I was, how inundated I was with these things. And yeah, it sounds like you kind of had a little bit of the same experience. And that's a really interesting thing I think that for people listening can take away from all this. So I do want to jump back for a second, though. You talked about this a little bit, but I did want to dive into it, which is when you first started on Twitter. So I don't actually know where did you first start attempting to write online? Was it Twitter? Was it newsletter? What was it?
Blog. Yeah, blog. So James Clear was the first person, and I listened to his interviews, and he said 2 blog posts, 2 years, sit tight, things will happen. I wrote for 6 months. Turns out that the internet, it's like dog years. If you listen to advice 5 years ago, it's actually like 30 years ago. So it was blog, newsletter, and then just working my way through over to Twitter.
Got it. Okay. Well, I scrolled all the way back through to the beginning of your tweets and stuff, and there is like 6 months or so where, most of your tweets have no likes, no comments, no engagement. And I've talked to people at Twitter and stuff. It's like when you first get started, it's like talking into a black hole.
Yeah.
But you did this for like 6 months and you didn't give up. Most people give up after month 1 or 2. So like, how did you mentally deal with that? How do you encourage other people to like push through that period that we all kind of have to deal with?
I think appreciating that the start is supposed to suck will help a little bit. For one, if you're expecting engagement and not getting it, it's just going to be so much more painful as you're going. The other thing was, and it still is, writing for me is a lot less about the external results and more about the internal ones. And so there are a lot of things with writing that I thought were brilliant. Like, I was learning so much faster. I was thinking so much clearer. I was learning how to present and articulate ideas that I hadn't really had the time or energy or reason to think about in the past. And so that's kind of what I was trying to focus on. I'm proving a craft that I enjoy, and the best outcomes are delayed, right? Like, yes, just because every tweet isn't adding to your audience like following or engagement doesn't mean it's not adding up to something, because you are getting better at the one skill that when people are paying attention, they actually have a reason to pay attention. So I'm glad no one read for those 6 months, because I didn't know what I was doing anyway. So it was a cool kind of forcing function with that, man. The other thing, it shouldn't have took 6 months in hindsight. So I do believe that, you have to find people to grow with, and the answers are already out there as to how to build an audience. I'm very stubborn. I was like, I'll figure this out myself. So certain things like that, which will make it a lot easier. But for the most part, it's just, you've got the finite game of followers and dollars, or the infinite game of improving at your craft and helping people. And that's one question I kept asking myself every day. It was on my whiteboard for ages as a reminder, which, by the way, I'm also very big on. Just write that shit down somewhere during the dark times. It will help you through. I just kept asking myself, did this idea help one person win? And that was really cool. I still do it, man. Like, sometimes I'm writing and I'm like, oh, my content's not performing as well. And I'm like, pretty useful though. And you're just kind of resetting it back to games you can win. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. So what was it about, you've talked about even before you left your job, the best time of your day was the time you spent writing. Like, what was it about writing? Why writing? Why did you fall in love with it?
I think it's this idea of writing being thinking. I am, or was, quite a anxious person, overthought a lot. But I was also very big into consuming content, right? Like, I would read constantly. I would, I love listening to podcasts and stuff. And I always felt like I had something to share, but I never had the medium to begin to communicate it. And I think originally I was planning on doing like YouTube version stuff. But the thing with writing is that words on a page are actually very unforgiving. On YouTube and stuff, you can kind of hide behind pretty beelines and visuals and stuff like that, but man, if your ideas are half cooked and you put it on paper, like, you're never going to be able to hold attention. And I found that challenge to actually be really fun, because I do feel like writing has this thing online where, because it's hard, few people do it, And then if you're able to commit to doing it, the asymmetrical bet, like the rewards are much higher. Obviously I wasn't thinking like that at the start. Like I didn't really know that. I just feel like putting ideas onto paper in a way that might help someone solve a problem, and this ability, you can't really go back through your videos and change what you said, right? But with writing, you can just go piece and read it again and again and again and play with the words and change the word structure. And to me, that's very, very exciting. Maybe not to my girlfriend who now gets this in the ear all the time, but I just think it's brilliant, man. I think it's a great way to put all your thoughts in a coherent way, and the added benefit of leverage, which is incredibly exciting. It just made it a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, that's okay. You brought up some really interesting points there. That's what I do. I'm not someone I would say I love writing like the way you describe it, for sure. But I do have a love of it, and I have to. With YouTube videos, I can edit around a lot of things, and I can change things, or I could cover up with B-roll and things. It's all absolutely true, and that's one of the beauties of that medium. But I can't get away from bad writing, because I write every single one of my videos word for word, script it, because I'm very meticulous, and I want my videos to have purpose, and I want certain things to be in the certain places. But I have no compulsion to become a full-on copywriter or do the things you're doing necessarily, but I still see the total value of knowing how to write well. And I think maybe you would agree that that skill is something that most people should try to some degree learn. And maybe you could talk about that for just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely, particularly copywriting, I believe that people should spend 3 to 6 months learning the fundamentals of it, because copywriting is just the ability to change minds, right? And that's what everyone is trying to do as a creator. You want to make an impact with your ideas, but before you can make an impact with your ideas, people need to be receptive to them. And so quite often people don't have like a sucky message, they have sucky presentation. And what copywriting will teach you is that the psychology of what you are saying is just as important as what you are saying. The fact that you could put sentences in a certain structure that will then change your entire framing of the message is really important. And so I wanted to be a copywriter originally, and I went pretty deep into learning it. And now it feels a bit like a cheat code being a creator, right? Because I can confidently send out my own emails, write my own tweets. Like one thing you said, man, scripts for talking. Like when I filmed my course, I originally tried to do it off the bat, right? And then I listened back and I was like, this is Waffleville. And so I wrote the whole thing out by hand just to make sure that every sentence was as trim as possible. So even if you don't love writing, I mean, chances are you're not going to love writing at the start anyway, because it does suck. But I just think, 6 months of basically a couple of copywriting books, a reason to practice, okay, which is why Twitter is brilliant, because a character limit will teach you more about clear and concise communication than any course will. So building an audience will teach you how to write, and then sending emails will teach you how to tell stories. And what you'll find is that whilst the process might be painful, the delayed results really aren't. And the caliber of connection as well as a result with your audience. And I mean, look at us two, we're only chatting because we resonate with each other on Twitter, right? I just feel like there are so many reasons to do it and really no reasons not to do it. So yeah, a good 3 to 6 month sprint where you have some form of project that forces you to write about your ideas. And by the end of it, you're going to have so much stuff for every video, piece of content and all that you'll probably just get hooked on doing it again anyway.
Yeah, I really like that. So even as like a selfish question, as someone who I would consider myself a very mediocre tweeter or even writer in a lot of ways, these are something I am conscious of and I want to always improve on. So, as you say, 3 to 6 months of actually studying copywriting, maybe to someone like me or even just a complete beginner, what are the resources? What are the books you would lean on? What are the places online you go to?
I think the best starting book would be Joe Sugarman's Adweek Copywriting Handbook. I actually don't think Gary Halbert's stuff is that great for learning. I think most of it's a bit wishy-washy for a beginner. So Adweek Handbook, cash advertising is brilliant because you'll learn how to communicate with like colorful language. And there's a book I love that very few people talk about from this guy called John Bajakovic called The 10 Commandments of A-List Copywriters. It's brilliant. And it will tell you the 10 things that go into all copy. The thing is, like, people don't learn copywriting because they think it means sales pages and sleazy funnel tactics, right? But if you read those books, you're going to realize that a lot of copy is just about presentation. And then you can go to apply that in everything you do. The other book that's I believe fundamental is Great Leads by Michael Masterson, I think it is. And the reason why that's important, like, you know, Andy, the hook is everything, right? You could have the Mona Lisa of a YouTube video, but if you fuck up the first 20 seconds, like, you've completely screwed it. Same is true with writing, right? Like, I wrote for so long because I didn't know how to write the first sentence without getting engagement, right? So Great Leads will teach you how to write hooks. I think you can overread and underdo. And so a few things that, like I said before, committing to output, gamification, right? I'm not going to learn how to write. What I did was I said, I'm going to write 30 threads in 90 days. And that was my sprint, right? I work in sprints all the time now, and 22 threads absolutely sucked, right? Like, no engagement, all going awful. And I think I went viral on like thread 23, and it just started to begin to click. Right. But like you said, it's not an overnight success. It's that I've been bleeding at the keyboard for a year before. So setting yourself some sort of challenge where you're not going like, oh, this writing needs to go well, but I need to write a lot. Another brilliant one there is, you know, like if you want to write daily emails or something for storytelling, which was a really cool forcing function. A couple other little things that I do that have helped well with writing, mate. Hand copying. So you don't learn a musical instrument by making up songs, right? You go and find your best songs and learn how to play them. And hand copying, whilst very slow, has this brilliant thing that you get to feel what it feels like to write like someone really good. And so what I did for a while, again, 90-day sprint, I was doing 45 minutes to an hour of hand copying every day. And I would pick anyone who I enjoyed. So you know, if I liked copywriting and I was building a sales page, I do a lot of sales page copy. But for the most part, I'll pick someone like Naval or Shane Parrish or people with really cool ideas, because at least I'm hand copying and learning. That led to a lot of boosting quality. And now what I do is, if I'm writing something important, I'll hand copy for 15 minutes as a warm up, just like you would, you know, for anything else. And which leads me to the final point with writing, treating it more like an athlete. And what I mean by that is warming up and taking the performance quite seriously in that. You know, beforehand I used to just like squeeze in writing here and there. And what I did was I moved the writing routine. So you had the non-negotiable window. I write at this time every morning. I do feel like morning writing is much better, because if you're trying to write after a 9 to 5, there are too many variables that can affect your mood. Doing stuff that is great for your mind, where like either walking before, stretching, meditating, journaling, just something to clear the mind before you write will help a lot with your writing. And understanding what you're trying to achieve with writing is a brilliant way to improve it, because like you probably know, Ernest Hemingway said this thing, the first draft of anything is shit, right? And so if you're expecting the first draft to go well and you're editing and backtracking every 2 sentences, it takes 4 times as long, and at the end you're 10 times as confused. So I always say, like, first draft is brain vomit, right? I just type like a motherfucker. I don't stop. I just go. Next day I come back in and now I'm like the professor. I'm marking myself. I'm cutting out stuff that doesn't make sense. And by wearing this different hat, it sounds a bit cliche, but I'm like, I am now the professor. And then the third read through, I'm the student, right? Because you kind of write for yourself at first, but you have to remember it's all for the reader. It's not about you at all. It's all about the reader. And so I tried to read it from my I call it my one true fan, the only person I'm writing to, my one true fan shoes. And I read what I'm writing and I'm like, does that make sense? Have I given enough examples? And so I've probably gone off a bit of a writing tangent. I do get a bit excited, but hopefully that was kind of useful all the way through.
How dare you go on an incredibly valuable tangent like that? What's wrong with you? That was awesome. I'm gonna have to relist. I'm gonna listen to that later again. That was very, very helpful. I do have some very practical questions based on what you just said, though. One, when you say hand copying, do you literally mean you write it by hand, or just you're copying on your computer? Like, what does that look like?
Write it by hand. So, when I first tried this, I was like, this is so stupid and slow. I'm never doing this, right? The whole point is it's meant to be stupid and slow because some things are meant to be done fast, right? So you write it by hand. You're meant to do it not on lined paper, just what I was learning when I was reading about it. Not on lined paper because apparently you learn better when there's no lines and stuff. I don't know why that is, like some cognition thing. And I just set a timer, have a cup of tea in the morning, and 45 minutes to an hour, I would just start copying. And I also hate wasting time. So classic type A. So what I also used to do was, let's say I decide to hand copy tweets. I would also have a document open. So when I hand copied a tweet, I'd rewrite it in my voice or my lens. And so I was generating so much content anyway. If I'm hand copying a sales page, and I'd be like, oh, that'd be really good to sell my product, I'll write my own little paragraph of it. So it didn't feel like a complete waste of time with that. But yeah, man, it's just brute hand copying away. I think the person who done it most famously is Benjamin Franklin. Like, he couldn't write until I think he was 14. By the time he was 21, he had one of the most popular publications in the country. And he just used to hand copy over and over and over. It's a really slow but fast way to get results.
Very cool. And then you talked about this idea of, writing for yourself, but then taking focus away from that and writing for, in your words, your one true fan. I've often thought about this, and I know other people who write online talk about these ideas. Is your one true fan defined? Do you have a document that you've, like, what their age is and all this stuff? Have you actually built out an avatar of this person, or is it just a mental person? Or how do you approach that?
Yeah, I do have an avatar, but I haven't visited that document for a year. But when I do teach my clients, I do suggest building one. And the framework that we follow with the one true fan is basically, when people try writing online, you think you have to please everyone, right? But the only result is that you please no one. You end up like this lukewarm version of yourself. And it seems paradoxical, but online, the smaller your focus, the better the result, right? And if you could pick one person and you know their dreams, their desires, their pains, their problems to a deep level, and you write just to that one person, then there's this quote from Jack Butcher. He says, like, the internet becomes a search function, right? Your content is so specific for one person that you can help the most, that all you then need to do is keep putting in the reps, and eventually you begin to attract people just like that person. And the problem here where people trip up, they do what you mentioned and start going like age and location and all this, but online we don't group together by how we look or how we are. It's by how we think and feel, right? So it's less demographics, more psychographics. And so it's about who do you understand the most when you're writing. And the way that I hack this, man, is like, who do you understand the most? Like, it's yourself, right? So I say this all the time in my newsletter, it's serve your shadow. Write to the person you used to be. Anything you learned today could be content tomorrow. And this like feedback loop of helping you win will then to begin to attract an audience who are just like you. And that makes business kind of, you're not really selling anymore, right? You're just creating content and inviting people to invest. So I write to myself every day. I serve my shadow. And I just make sure that I'm thinking, what am I worried about? What was I terrified of? What problems did I have? What do I want to do? And like these days, the audience is really fun because engagement's pretty high and all that. And I think it's just because it's just me versus me out there.
That's awesome. I like that a lot. You did talk a little bit about this, and maybe this is what you're kind of one of the things you were hinting at. But I liked your analogy of treating writing like you would be like you were a writing athlete. You do the warm up and you kind of take the performance seriously. I wonder how very, very stereotypical writer's block fits into that. I know a lot of people get hung up and they can't get past. They sit in front of the blank screen and they're frozen. What are and it's very, cliche to talk about writer's block or whatever, but like it's a real thing that people experience, but maybe it's not actually writer's block. Maybe it's something else. Like, what have you found as an answer to that?
I think writer's block is more of a symptom than a cause, right? Like something's not quite right in your creative process. And this is where I get a bit hesitant on prescriptions, because there's a few things that might go wrong. But for me, when I've had writer's block, generally there's one of three things have happened. One, I've stopped pursuing my curiosity and I've started trying to please the crowd. I'm like, what does my audience want to hear? What's going to make me do well with my newsletter? All that stuff. And that it happens less these days. But you just want to write selfishly, because if you're genuinely excited about what you're writing about, as you're writing, 10 more ideas come usually anyway. And then you just, you can just kind of keep going from there, which leads me to the next point. If you don't write down your ideas immediately, you will lose them indefinitely. All right. So now these days, man, any idea that comes up, except if I'm on a podcast, it gets written down. I'll be on a date with my girlfriend. We'll be chatting about the business. And then I'll be like, sorry, love, give me a minute. I need to write this down. And so when it comes to writing, I've never ever written from the blank screen. I have a Notion document with thousands of ideas. Most of them are terrible. And I'll just scroll and like I said, I let my energy just go, yeah, that was pretty cool, that one. Let's turn that into a tweet, thread, newsletter, whatever the aim of the day is. So we've got the whole pleasing people, we've got the writing down notes. And the other thing, mate, is habits. We live at a time where everyone wants to be more productive and it's all go, 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 go. Creativity requires the complete opposite approach. Like the habits that support creativity are very anti what society wants you to be doing, right? So when I quit my job, I was like, holy shit, I'm going to write 10 hours a day here. It's going to be brilliant. My fingers are going to bleed. And I probably write about the same amount, 3 to 4 hours a day. Everything else are the habits that go into it, right? So I'm walking 60 to 90 minutes a day. I'm reading 2 hours a day. I am hopping on podcasts, having conversations with interesting people, all because these are inputs, and creativity requires this like broad range of things. So quite often, man, if you've got writer's block, like I think it could be a bit of an excuse, not in a bad way. I just feel like you can hide behind it. I think looking at what might be going wrong in your creative output system, and then even if that's not helping, the thing that gets me through if I'm really struggling is, again, project-based learning or project-based writing. Instead of being like, here's how you do this and how you do that. If you notice in my content now, mate, it's pretty much all it's either how I did something or how I'm doing something. So if I've got nothing to write about, I ain't doing shit that's interesting, which is a reason I need to go do something, because, at the end of the day, your whole point as a writer is to make your reader feel something, right? And excitement shows through. If it's boring to write, it's boring to read. So pick your option out of them, mate.
That's great. I like that a lot. So one thing you talked about several times in there, but also previously, was falling the trap of like trying to write stuff for everyone, trying to please everyone. On the other side of that, when you write specific, for specific people, typically you're going to have some polarizing opinions, not just what you share, but also the reaction people have to you. So I am curious that now that you've ventured on your own, you're putting yourself out there, you're trying to do creative stuff. You have haters, inevitably, people who come out of from wherever the corner of the troll internet they scurry from. Like how do you deal with that? How do you handle that? How do you think about that?
Classically, I really care what people think about me. So I'll start this story with that caveat. And the first time I got hate was the first time I went super viral that wasn't about my neck. So my neck dread, anybody who hates on like the fact that I had a broken neck and a tumor removed and it's all very positive, like they're going to hell anyway. It was all good there. But I wrote a thread about books, and books just, I don't know why, like people argue about books online. It's very strange, grown men, all this thing. But anyway, I was in the Peak District, which is a beautiful part of the country. And I checked Twitter before I was going to go on this walk, and I saw this tweet, and this guy was like, Kieran Drew's a fucking moron. Like, look at these books. And he mentioned James Clear and all these things. And I went for a walk, man. And it was a 2-hour walk. And I spent the entire time thinking about this guy. And I got home and I was like, you fucking idiot, man. Like, how stupid is that the opinion of a stranger can affect the way you think so much? I'm very grateful for him, actually. We're actually kind of friends now. Because I was like, he made me realize that haters aren't your customers and haters aren't your fans, right? So why the hell would you listen to them anyway? And originally I started to dampen down my views for fear of judgment. But all that's actually going to do is stop you attracting the people that you can help the most. So something you touched on, Andy, that what was your best tweet? Sorry,
The 9 to 5 jobs are comfort money.
Right, like we're not going to sit here and actually say that if we're having a pint, right? Like it's a funny thing, but online, everyone wants to be authentic, but when you shoot for authentic, you actually undershoot. I think quite often because you're scared of the haters, right? You're scared of what people think. And so what I say for tweets like that is, which is a beautiful tweet, by the way, is cranking the dial, right? It's taking your strongest views and just turning it up a notch. And these days, man, like when I write a tweet that's like polarizing like that, it's kind of fun. I just sit back and see what happens. And any day, if I get any hate, I'm like, that's cool. Like I actually usually am quite self-depreciating. I'll join in hating me too. So, I write about money a lot and people be like, oh my God, look at this stupid internet bro talking about money. And I'll be like, I know, what a prick, right? And it really takes the sting out of it. So, yeah, man, screw the haters. Like, you're here to help someone, and that's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah, I love that. That's really, really powerful advice. And I think that's a great kind of way to view it. Plus, half the time, it's not even hate towards you. It's just something wrong with themselves, and they don't know how to express it, and it comes out because you're an anonymous keyboard warrior on the internet, and there's no repercussion,
My golden rule, mate, is don't argue with strangers online.
Yeah.
And I had some recent drama on Twitter, which we don't need to get into, but it blew up, right? I got accused of something, everything went very wrong. And I had maybe 50 tweets that I wanted to send to this guy, none of them nice. And eventually I was like, don't, you've written this rule down a while ago for a reason. Came back the next day and ended up with an incredible response from everyone going, wow, look at how Kieran didn't rise to it and stuff like that. And I was like, trust me, if you read my drafts, it would be a different story. But just why argue with strangers online, man? No one wins. So someone wants to give hate, just feel sorry for them. Yeah.
I like that because that also is kind of a testament to, you reacting that way. And maybe you tell me I'm wrong with this assessment, but it seems like you kind of reacting, having that, ability to not react or be able to take a step back isn't just like a trait of you naturally. You're the character you're born with. That is like years of kind of learning the ropes and experience and like mindset and stuff. And you're still going to get it wrong, right? You're still going to mess it up from time to time, but that's not like just in the moment. Oh, look, I'm a superhero. I've been practicing these things. I believe maybe is that true?
Absolutely, man. So this is fundamentals of stoicism, right? And there's a quote from Viktor Frankl where it's up between stimulus and response. There's a small window, and in that window is your ability to choose. And I never had that window, right? I was a very reactive person, always anxious, always feeling sorry for myself, blaming the world. I had some really bad issues when I was a teenager with my neck and stuff. And that just taught me that actually the only control you have in life is the way you respond, right? Character is everything. And so, it's completely learned, man. Like these days, I still get angry and I still want to do and say stupid shit. But there's always that voice in the back of my head just being like, yeah, but you shouldn't. And it's just something I think about a lot. So
interesting. So given that I talk to a lot of people who are self-made, that have some success under their belt to some degree. It would be in bad form if I didn't talk about this even briefly, but I had that kind of in the intro talking about just, I think it was May, you launched something, and in the process of about 4 days, you made over $140,000, which in itself is just like an incredible headline, and so congratulations to that. But I would love to dive into this just at least briefly. First, like how did you do that?
Yeah, so this was my product high impact writing. And how did I do that? I guess it started with the first product, right? And then I released my first product as like an MVP a year ago and had no clue what I was doing. And I spent the year learning how to sell it and how to build something that people want. And do you want to go through the whole process? I'm happy to hang around for a bit longer if you want it. Yeah. So look, products. The reason why I like digital products is because they're super high leverage. You build it once, there's no extra fulfillment. And what I have been doing in terms of people are like, how did you make that much money in 4 days? It started 12 months before. Because for a year in my audience building, my whole ethos is reputation over revenue. So I've built 8 free video courses that are better than all my competition's paid stuff, and I've given them away. As a result, I have created a lot of trust with my audience, and I've also created a lot of potential buyers because people would take my free courses and they're waiting for the secret sauce, right? The system's all put together cleanly. They know I can talk. They know I have interesting ideas, and they like me, which is a really big thing online because I don't know, like obviously I don't know if your audience know me much, but I tried to build quite authentically, very open, very honest, and that was the brand building strategy. I'm almost doing the whole finger there thing with strategy, but I had been building goodwill up to about December of this year. And then I made the announcement I was quitting coaching and I'm going all in on my newsletter. And the only thing I want to build is something that helps me write more. January, I started to mention there was a product coming, high impact writing. Actually, I didn't even know the name of it. I was making up the name in my newsletter just to test responses. And every newsletter I sent, let's say I make a point about the 90-day sprint. I'll be like, yeah, by the way, this is going to be a module in my new writing course that's coming up in later in the year. And if you like the sound of that, click this link, you join the waiting list. And the cool thing with that, mate, was 3 things. I began to build what self-coding calls tension in marketing, right? People, when they come to launch a product, they talk about it 2 weeks before. But if you talk about 3-4 months before, it's like this elastic band. You keep pulling and pulling and pulling. So that when you do let go, like it's go time, baby, right? The other cool bit was I had a waiting list of 1,000 people before I launched. And thirdly, people were voting with their clicks what sounded really cool. So like I wrote an email called the story tweet, explaining how I share a story every single day. And again, join the list, and it outperformed every single link. And so what do you think my copy was about? And all my sales emails. And I spent 3 more months just talking about story tweets and showing my stuff in action. So that by the time it came to launch time, people wanted to buy. No one was like, oh, what is this course? Like everybody had heard about it and it was coming. And so that was like the 3 month prior. And then as we got into the final 2 weeks pre-launch, this is what I did different to my last one. My last one, I was terrified of selling. I was like, oh, I don't want to be too pushy and all these things. But I think I have a blend of talking to internet marketers and also just thinking, you know what, fuck it. Like, let's just see how it goes. I think if you're scared of marketing yourself, you probably just haven't given enough value. So I was ready to give this a good go. And on Twitter, what I did was, firstly, we made the course really high quality, right? And so I could screenshot the slides, 3 screenshots a day with lessons from the course. And the way that I actually built the course, mate, was every lesson starts with a big myth or a big reveal. So for example, the pleasing everyone, right? I would start off about audience building and I would go, everyone thinks to be a writer, you need to please everyone. But the secret is to please one person 1,000 times. And then everything is framed from there. So when I started creating content around it, people were like, man, this guy is just dropping bombs every day. Like, what are all these things that he's talking about? Meanwhile, on email, so this is a lot of writing, by the way. On email, I started to, a week before, share more stories about the course coming. So long story short, by the time the course was coming out, I'd created a ridiculous amount of content. When the course launched, I mean, one thing I asked myself was, what are the variables for a product launch, right? And it's your marketing, your hype, your reputation, which we spoke about, your copy. So I spent maybe 100 hours learning how to write a sales page. I do feel like it's one of those things that when you write your first one, you don't care. And then when you realize how much goes into copy, you're terrified. And when the launch day actually came, mate, I had been working flat out for 2 to 3 months. And I clicked send. And my girlfriend and I were going to go for a date. And we're like, oh, we'll watch, the internet money come in. It's all really good fun. Dude, I sold 6 copies in 3 hours. And I was like, oh shit, you have completely fucked this up. Something is seriously wrong in your funnel for that amount of work to only make that many. And it would have been a 20K launch, right? Because the first day is meant to be the best day. But what happened was I treated those 4 days like game day. And so every day, it's simple mathematics of launches, right? It's impressions to the page will result in X percentage of conversions. So thread every single day, spaces. I were creating loads. I think I wrote 23 emails in 4 days. So a lot of marketing again. And again, if this sounds really tiring, like it was really tiring, but all I was telling myself was, look, I didn't know it would go this big. I was like, you could do 4 days work in a year. So why wouldn't you give it your all? I made sure the product had this inbuilt urgency and scarcity, i.e., if you bought the course, I would also give you a free webinar, which was a course in itself on how to build a business by writing online. So people were like, and the cool bit with that sort of bonus, mate, is that it's implied that the product is therefore good, right? If I'm giving you a bonus on how to build your business, the writing advice must be great. So there's a cool implication. And I basically said to people like, look, you buy it now or you wait 3 months, because I want the people to buy this course to get ahead, right? You got all these strategies, all these things. So it had the inbuilt urgency and scarcity there. And I'll let you kind of interrupt me in a second. There was one more thing. I built in this social proof flywheel. So I mentioned I only got 6 sales in the first day. When people bought my course, I sent an email, and every one of my emails has a little sign of me, smiling and like handwritten message. And this one was just, I really appreciate that you bought the course. And it would be super cool if you think the course is good, if you could take a screenshot of it and post it on Twitter. And I gave them a reason. One of the things we're selling in influence is that if you ask someone to do something, give them a reason. The reason doesn't even have to be good. Much higher response rate. So I said to people, I can't sell anymore. I'm outsold. I don't want to talk about it anymore. So if you would do it for me, I'll share it with my audience. By the final day, I was clicking retweet every 5 to 10 minutes. And so on the final day itself, we made 75K, which was fucking crazy because day one I'd quit. Yeah, I was like, you have fucked this up. And so when we got to the end by Tuesday, me and my girlfriend were just sitting here thinking, what the hell just happened? So that's my launch in a nutshell. Tell me where you want to go. I'm cool for a little bit longer if you want to talk more about business.
Yeah. Okay. That's super cool. Thank you for kind of breaking that down and kind of giving a little bit of behind the scenes on that. I mean, it's like I joked at the beginning, it's an overnight success, years in the making. This launch, I feel like that's such a cool insight that, you did really, really well in 4 days, but how many months and how many, tens, 20s, hundreds of hours are you putting into this thing ahead of time? And by the way, I've looked at your sales page several times. I keep taking notes from it because I've got to redo the sales page for my private community, Sleep Money Club. And I just there's just so many things. I'm like, this is great. So top-notch job on all that. But it's one thing I'm hearing over and over again as you say this and as you kind of tell your story. And I feel like so many people who are successful have this in common, which is they're, for whatever reason, able to see the long term and not and they're not short-term minded. I mean, all humans are present-minded. We're short-term creatures, but certain people like yourself are able to push past that boundary. How do you do that? How do you cultivate a long-term mindset for stuff like this, for building online, for what have you?
Again, maybe a bit hesitant for prescriptions because I do feel like a lot of this is personality based. And
you do have the medical background though, so prescribe away.
That is true. Yeah, I've got my terrible dental handwriting and stuff, so I'll write one out. Look, the way I think about this game, right, is you have, I love decision-making frameworks. And my main decision-making framework with building online is money now versus leverage later. Right? Which is a decision. So for example, I got rid of all my coaching because thankfully, it's still crazy, my hourly rate was getting to $500 an hour, which was fucking sick because I was just talking compared to drilling a tooth and bending over and all that stuff. But I'm constantly thinking, how much leverage can I build in the present? Because all of that builds to a much higher hourly rate long term. So for example, building an audience, right? It is a crazy amount of time to go in without results. Now, so for example, I used to write an email. Email would take 2 hours to write, $0 made, 0 responses. The same email now takes half an hour to write and 25,000 readers, thousands of dollars. So the long-term leverage, right? Leverage is the key to disconnecting time from money. So every time I'm taking on a project now, it's all about deference of gratitude. I'm very grateful. Deference of gratification. Right? And it gets tough, actually. I know it's not, most people don't really care about the problems of a 6-figure creator, but I think a lot of my friends get trapped in selling time because time gets quite lucrative online, right? But to me, man, it's all about how much money can I make now to be comfortable. Thankfully, reading, walking, these things are very cheap. I like to go on the occasional holiday, and the rest of it is just how much effort can I put in on the basis that in a decade, the things I am building now will help me make decisions that would get the same result of a year's worth of work. So High Impact Writing was the first time I saw that decision pay off. Because before I never felt stupid, man. Like I spent so long writing when my friends were landing clients. I was like, what are you doing? Like you're procrastinating. But like you say, it's asymmetrical bets. And most of your audience internet entrepreneurs?
People who want to, find freedom through passive income, through investing, that type of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it's digital leverage or money leverage, right? People leverage is awful. That's why I hate as a dentist. I'm so reliant on the people around me. But when you're building online or just building wealth, it's, I have my ISA and stuff, and that's ticking away. And these things are just, it's all about saying, look, most of the reasons you want money are engineered, right? It's advertising, it's marketing, it's mimetic theory. It's like, I don't need a new shirt. I don't need this shit. I need to be happy. I need to be pursuing my purpose. And then the rest of it, man, is just like, cool, well, let's do something impressive with it. So I don't know. That's just how I'm wired to think. Yeah,
that's great. So I am very convinced that this business model that you're doing and I'm doing just differently, but this type of thing is the better way to do business. The two kind of parallel ideas I have in my head is the traditional way, which is you come up with an idea, you build a product, you hire a bunch of people, you try to make the best thing you can, and then you try to figure out how to get customers and stuff. Versus what we're doing, which is build an audience, build people who like what you have to say, your ideas, etc., like you, and then what's things you can build that would actually be useful and they would like and they would be happy to buy. And then if you mess it up and the first thing you do is just complete garbage, complete shit, well, then you learn a couple good lessons and you do another one, but you still have those same people who are there just to hear from you. I mean, do you view it this way? Do you make that same assessment?
100%, man. It just seems the smart way to build. So the audience first approach, right? Like a business is as successful as the problem it solves. And I've got friends that have disappeared for years building like the perfect product. And in that time, I've launched 10 offers and let my audience tell me what they like and don't like. Like when people say they get lucky in business 30 years ago, you had to get really lucky. Right time, right place, right idea, all these things. But I think when we're building online, you really are just engineering the luck, right? Create content around ideas you believe in, attract people who think like you, ask them what the common problem is, build your new solution. Some people buy it, brilliant. Make that product better. The people that have bought it have shown themselves to be your future fans. As you're improving the product, they get rewards and you're beginning to attract more people because you now have advocates saying, this product's getting better and better. And it's just a really cool snowball effect that like, because you're building an audience around something you believe in, it's just a lot of fun. And people say like our business is really scary and risky. Obviously, touch wood. I don't think you get that so much as a creator because like you said, there are just so many ways that you can build your business after, right? Attention is an incredible asset when you build it the right way. So yeah, I think we're very like-minded in that.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about creating luck, and I've heard you talk about previously in other podcasts talk about creating serendipity. And maybe you've also read this, but one kind of thing that really hit home for me was I read David Perel talking about building serendipity vehicles. And this is something early on in my kind of online content career that just like hit like home for me. And that's kind of what you were describing. Have you read that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I was fascinated by this idea, and it just it proves to be so true. Yeah, overnight success, being lucky, all that is just it's self-created. You can be lucky, but you have to like create it for yourself, and it seems like you kind of live those truths.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of piece it together in retrospect a lot with this, right? It's very easy to say like, oh, this was the plan and stuff, but most of it's just been bouncing around ideas. But the serendipity thing, which is this idea of the more stuff you build, the more opportunities you'll attract, right? Like, it's 100% that. Particularly with writing online, like every word is a worker, day and night, building reputation, creating relationships, scaling your revenue, and I just think it's a very endearing way to approach the game. Because even now, like I'm starting a new writing project, and there's this voice in my back of my head going, "This isn't going to make you money." But then you come back to the fundamentals, and it's like it's a big serendipity vehicle. The outcome of this will open up more doors, and I just quite like playing the game that way.
Cool. Yeah. So if I'll go ahead and end it there. I love the idea of ending it with people who are listening to this, walking away with the idea that maybe, build some serendipity vehicles, maybe put yourself out there in some way and see what sticks and see what you can chase. Well, Kieran, thank you so much for all your time, all this knowledge, all this stuff. I'm a big fan of yours online, all your writing and your newsletter and stuff. And I will link to all that stuff down in the description, in the show notes for this. But thank you again for spending the time with me.
Thanks a lot, Andy, man. It's been a lot of fun. Cheers.
All right. See you, everybody. Thanks for listening.